My name is Henry Calloway. I am 64 years old, and I have been the sole keeper of the Black Snout Light Station on the outermost point of Cutler, Maine, for 22 years. The Coast Guard owns the station. They pay me a small stipend. They send a maintenance crew down from Southwest Harbor twice a year, in the spring and in the fall. They mail me diesel drums and replacement bulbs and boxes of freeze-dried food and government cheese when the ferry can't get through. They have, in 22 years, never once asked me why I keep a handwritten list tacked to the inside of my bedroom door on a 6-penny nail. I have, in 22 years, never once offered to explain. I'll tell you the rules tonight. I'm telling you because the ferry is not coming this week. The radio says the storm is going to ride right up the Bay of Fundy and kiss the coastline, and the Coast Guard has told me to shelter in place, which on Black Snout means staying in the keeper's cottage while the ocean climbs the cliff. I have food, I have fuel, I have a charged lantern battery and a working radio and a sheet of paper pinned to my door, and I am going to read it to you, because I think this may be the last winter I keep this light. I can hear the buoy already. Bell C07, 3 miles offshore, has the wrong rhythm. It is early to be hearing it this clear. The wind is supposed to come from the southwest. Tonight it is coming from due east, which is the wrong direction for almost everything out here, but for the buoy especially. When the buoy sounds wrong, the boatmen say the season is beginning to turn over. When I hear the buoy wrong, I check the list. I'm going to tell you what the list says and why. I'm going to tell you what I have done, and what I have seen, and what I have been too careful or too stubborn to admit out loud before. You don't have to believe me. You only have to keep listening, because what I am about to explain is the work of one person's life, and I have no reason left to dress it up. The Black Snout Light sits on a thumb of granite that points east into the Atlantic, like a man leaning off a dock. The station was built in 1857, decommissioned and recommissioned so many times. The Coast Guard historian in Portland calls it the flipped switch. It has been functional since 1996, after a restoration that turned it from a tourism prop into a working aid to navigation. The lens is a second-order Fresnel, 8 feet tall, weighing about a ton, made of glass panels nested in a brass frame that must be polished twice a year, or it will fog from the inside. My job is to keep that lens clean, that lamp lit, that radio answering, and that door closed. I climb the tower 4 times a day, 6 in the winter, when the ice builds on the gallery rail. I check the lamp, I check the fog signal. I am supposed to keep the radio on channel 16, from half an hour before sunset to half an hour after sunrise, and on channel 22 during the day. I keep a logbook open on the kitchen table, and I write every radio call, every weather update from the cutter out of Jonesport, every boat I sight, every lighthouse visitor I don't let up the stairs. The keeper's cottage sits about 40 yards in from the base of the tower. It is a small gray salt box with a slate roof and a stovepipe that leans slightly to the left, the way the whole point leans to the left, the way everything out here eventually leans toward the ocean. There is 1 bedroom, 1 kitchen, 1 parlor that I have made into a workshop, and a back porch where I stack the 5-gallon jugs of kerosene I keep for the backup lamp. The wind hits that porch first. You get used to it. You get used to the way a Maine Atlantic winter sounds, which is not the way a movie makes it sound, but the way an empty cattle truck sounds at highway speed, hour after hour, with a little more salt mixed in every month. In the summer, the ferry brings supplies 3 times a week. There are tourists. There are painters and bird watchers. Boatmen out of Eastport bring their children to see the lens. In the summer, the light goes automatic at midnight, and the radio mostly sleeps. In the summer, the only real danger is the cliff edge crumbling under the parking lot, and the occasional moose walking out and scaring the new hires at the gift shop in Lubec, 12 miles down the road. I keep the light for the winter. They asked for a winter keeper in 2002, and I was the only applicant who didn't ask for a heat stipend, because I was raised in a house without central heat, and I do not pretend this is more than it is. I am a man who can keep a fire going. They needed that. They fly me out in October and fly me back in April. I have done it 22 times. I know the smell of the lamp oil at 30 below. I know the sound the railing wire makes when the ice is letting go. I know exactly how many steps it is from my bedroom door to the lamp room, and that is the first thing on the list. Earl Pendergast was the keeper before me. He was winter keeper from 1968 until he retired in 1986 with a hip that would not get any better, and he lived in Lubeck with his sister in a house with green shutters until he died in his sleep on the morning of February 14th, 2003. Earl took me up the tower on my second day of training and told me he was going to give me a list, and he told me not to let anyone take it from me, and he told me that my job from now on was to keep remembering what was on it. He did not read it to me from a piece of paper. He told me the rules one at a time as we stood at different places in the station, and he made me repeat them back to him, and then he made me write them down when we got back to the cottage. He watched me write each one. He never let me read them out loud from where I had written them. He said, "You read them to yourself, but the lighthouse hears you, and the lighthouse does not need to hear the list." I was 42. I thought he was old and lonely, and I didn't say so. Earl was a small man with whiskers and smell of wool, and his left hand curled up at the end because of what he said was a knuckle thing from poling a dory in the 1950s. He did not drink. He did not swear. He had a radio voice that the fishermen could hear clearly in a Force 8, and he could climb the tower in weather that kept the cutter in port. I respected him. I didn't understand him. That was the wrong way around, and I knew it. He read me the rules in reverse, in order to see how I'd react when I didn't know which one was coming. The last rule he told me was the first rule on my list, about the steps, and I have never forgotten what he said before he told me it. He said, "Henry, this station has been lit since 1857, because someone always stayed, and the things that come up the cliff in winter do not care who is standing in the light. The list is not superstition. The list is not religion. The list is what the light is for." Then he told me Rule 1. When he was finished with the list, he folded his hands on the kitchen table, and he said, "Now I am going to tell you why this list is on the inside of your door, and not in your pocket, and not in a drawer." He said, "You put it on the inside of the door because that is the door you open last when you go to the tower in a storm. You read it going out. You don't read it coming back. Coming back is not the problem. The problem is always on the way up the stairs." Then Earl went home to Lubeck and never came back to the point. He died 8 years later. I have kept the light. I have kept the rules. I have kept my own observations alongside them in the logbook, and I have never asked the Coast Guard any questions that would force them to ask me one back. The list is on my door now. I am going to get up, walk to the door, take the list down, and read it to you. And as I read, I am going to tell you what each rule costs. Rule 1. When you climb the tower, do not count the steps. Do not look down the stairwell on the way up. If you hear footsteps behind you, do not stop, do not turn around, and do not speak aloud until you reach the lamp room. The Black Snout Tower has 142 spiral steps from the first platform up to the lantern deck. I have climbed them 10,000 times. I climbed them so often in my second winter I was counting them in my sleep, the way some men count sheep. And Earl called me up the road to ask what was wrong. He said he could hear me on the radio calling out numbers. He said, "Don't do that." He said, "Count the lamp, not the steps." I didn't understand for 3 years. Then it happened. It was February of my third winter, 2005. The temperature was something like 12 below. The wind was northeast, gusting 50. The kind of night where you put on 2 pairs of socks and your boots feel like cinder blocks, and the lantern is the only warm color in the world. I was halfway up the first flight, just past the second landing, when I heard my own footsteps come to a stop behind me. I was still walking. The sound of my steps kept going. There was a second set, just a half beat behind mine, matching my pace, matching my weight on the iron. I stopped. The steps behind me kept going. I didn't turn around. Earl had told me not to turn around. Earl had told me to keep climbing, not to stop. Earl had told me that if I stopped on the stairs, the footsteps would catch up. I had not believed Earl about that. I believed him about the buoy and the fog and the radio. I did not believe him about the stairs. I climbed. I did not turn. I did not speak. I made it to the lamp room with my heart pushing out through my neck, and I shut the door at the top of the stairs and put the latch on. I stood with my hands on the brass rail of the lantern base and tried to be quiet, and the footsteps behind me continued up the stairs, past the door, all the way up. I heard them on the gallery deck. I heard them walk around the lamp. 3 times the lamp throws a beam. They go around the gallery, and 3 times that night, something walked the gallery, while the wind screamed, and I watched through the panes of the lantern. When it was over, I called Earl on the radio. He didn't answer. He was asleep. I called him again at 6 a.m. He picked up and he said, "Did you stop on the stairs?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Did you turn around?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Then you will be fine. Do not mention it to anyone. Write it in your log as a wind gust. Do not count the steps again. It's been 20 years since that night. It has happened to me 4 more times since. Once in 2011, twice in 2017, once last December. Each time was on a night when the buoy was sounding wrong. Each time the footsteps matched my pace exactly, which meant there was a second, heavier footfall landing slightly ahead of my weight, like someone carrying something, or like someone whose joints were no longer quite like mine. Each time I made it to the lamp room, and the gallery was walked around the lamp. I never saw who it was. I never looked down the stairwell. Earl told me if I ever looked down, I would go down. And Earl told me, I have seen keepers go down the stairs and not come up. I don't know who walks the gallery in front of me. I don't know if there is a second person, or if it is something that makes a sound like another person. I know that when I reach the lamp room and I lock the door, I am safe in the lamp room, and I am never safe in the stairwell, and that is the first thing on the list. Rule 2. The lamp bulb is to be replaced at the moment of sunset on the first Tuesday of every month. By me, alone, with the door to the gallery latched, and the bulb must be the bulb the supply officer has shipped. If the bulb in the box does not match the bulb in the lamp, put the box by the lamp and walk away without opening it. Do not turn on the backup lamp that night. Leave the station dark. The supply officer has no idea any of this matters. They ship me a box every month with 3 bulbs and a printed instruction sheet that USDA forgot to remove from another contract, dated 1974. The bulbs are heavy glass with a brass base. They are intended for the lamp, and for most of my career they have been fine. In the spring, in the summer, the bulb in the box matches the bulb in the lamp. You unscrew the old one, you screw the new one in, you log it, you go to bed. In January of my 8th winter, the bulb in the box was wrong. It was bigger, it was heavier. It had a label that read, in handwriting that was not the supply officer's, for station use only. The print on the side said 230 volt, in red. The bulb in the lamp was the standard 110 volt, in black. I was on the gallery that night at sunset. The wind was calm. The sea was flat. The buoy was sounding wrong, which I already knew, because I had heard it from the kitchen at lunch that day. I had the box in my hand. I had the lamp open. I had the wrench. I put the box on the lamp base. I left it there. I went back down the stairs. I did not turn on the backup lamp. I sat in the kitchen for 9 hours with no light at the top of the tower, and the radio, and a candle I kept on the windowsill. The Coast Guard could check the bulb from Southwest Harbor on a flight test. I knew they would know. I knew what would happen when they found out the lamp was dark. At 3 in the morning, the kitchen radio made a sound I never want to hear again. It was not static. It was not a channel shift. It was a voice, very close to the microphone, that said, "Keeper," once, then nothing, then, "Keep the light on." I picked up the handset, and I did not answer. I did not answer because Earl had told me the second rule was about the wrong bulb, and the lesson of the wrong bulb was that there is another bulb that belongs to the lamp. Earl had told me, "The lamp is a station. The station is not yours. Don't put the wrong lamp inside it." I did not answer. I let the lamp be dark. I let the wrong bulb be on the base. I did not remove the box, and I did not put the wrong bulb into the lamp. At sunrise, I carried the box down the stairs and walked it to the seaward edge of the point, and I threw it into the surf. The Coast Guard noticed the lamp had been dark. They flew a man from Southwest Harbor. The man looked at the bulb and looked at me and asked me what happened. I said the bulb had burned out at sunset and that I had not switched to backup because I had lost my footing on the gallery in the dark and had not wanted to climb again. He frowned. He wrote it down. He gave me another bulb from his travel kit and left. The next month, the supply officer sent what looked like the correct bulb, standard 1110 volt, in black. I have never received a wrong bulb again. I have replaced the bulb at sunset on the first Tuesday of every month for 20 years. I have done it on nights of bad weather and clear weather, and every weather in between. I have not opened the wrong bulb's box. I have not put any bulb in the lamp that did not come with the box I was supposed to open that month. In 2019, on a first Tuesday in June, I had a visit from a contractor from the Coast Guard Civil Engineering Unit. He was checking the Fresnel for fog. He asked me where I kept my spare bulbs. I told him in the third drawer of the kitchen. He opened the drawer and saw 6 boxes. He laughed and said, "Why are they all the same brand?" I said, "Because that's what they send." He laughed and said, "Did you know the bulbs are old stock?" They were in the supply officer's warehouse since the 1990s. I said I didn't know. I told him I had received the same bulb every month. He laughed. "That's because they're shipping you the same boxes. They think you're an institution." I didn't tell him what I had thrown into the ocean. I didn't tell him about the box I had not opened. I wrote it in the log the next day in pencil, the way Earl wrote his notes. I have written everything since, and I keep the log. Rule 3. If, during a radio check or scheduled channel call, a second voice answers you from your own transmission, do not respond to that voice. End the call, move the radio off channel 16, turn it back on in 15 minutes. If you hear the same voice a second time that night, light the backup lamp and do not speak until sunrise. The Coast Guard has me check in at 6 a.m., noon, 6 p.m., and midnight. I have heard the voices before. Earl's voice, mostly. Earl's voice on a dead channel, saying my name, or saying Northwest, or saying nothing at all, just the breath. Earl died in 2003. Earl's voice has been on the radio 9 times, in 22 winters. I have heard other voices too. Voices of fishermen I have known, who are now dead. Voices of Coast Guard officers who rotated out and went home and never came back. I have heard my own voice, on a few nights, which is the one that unsettles me the most. Rule 3 is the one I failed twice. The first time was 2009. I was calling in at midnight. The cutter out of Jonesport had come in clear. I said, "Black Snout Light, Henry Calloway, checking in." I heard the cutter respond, "Roger, Black Snout, Jonesport reads you 5x5. I said, "Standing by." Then, before I could set the handset down, the same channel played my own voice back to me, saying my name, twice, slowly, as if it had been recorded from inside my own throat. "Henry, Henry, Henry." I put the handset down. I did not respond. I moved the radio off channel 16 and onto 22, an unused weather band, and I sat down on the kitchen floor. I did not turn the radio back on for 3 hours. Earl would not have approved. Earl would have told me to light the backup lamp. Earl would have told me that the second voice was asking the lighthouse if there was one person inside. I did not light the backup lamp. The lighthouse was already lit. The lamp was the lamp. I did not need the backup lamp to know how many keepers were inside the house. The second time I failed, I answered. It was 2016, March, a Friday. I had just replaced the bulb properly that day. The Coast Guard had been up the previous week for maintenance. The buoy was sounding wrong. I had been feeling a tightness behind my eyes that had nothing to do with weather. I called in at 6, and the cutter responded, and I said standing by, and I heard my own voice say, "Henry, come down." It was not my voice from earlier that night. It was a voice I had not yet spoken, saying words I had not yet said, exactly as I would have said them if I had walked down to the seaward edge of the point and crouched beside the cliff and spoken to the water. I answered. I said, "This is Black Snout." The voice said, "Henry, come down." I said, "Identify, please." The voice said, "Come down." I put the handset down. I lifted the backup lamp from the porch. I set it on the kitchen table. I lit it. I did not speak until sunrise. I did not sleep. I sat with my back against the stove, with the lamp on the table, with the radio on the kitchen chair where I could hear every channel and answer none, until the buoy stopped sounding wrong, which it did just before the sun hit the gallery. When I finally turned the radio back on at 7:15, I got a priority call from the cutter at Jonesport. They said there had been an APIRB signal 5 miles east of Black Snout at 2:40 that morning. They wanted to know if I had seen anything. I said no. They asked if I had heard anything on the radio. I said no. They thanked me. They mentioned there had been no vessel in distress listed. The APIRB had been anonymous. The signal came from a personal beacon, not a vessel. They said it was likely a false alarm. I did not tell them the time of the signal. I did not tell them I had heard my voice 3 times that night. I did not tell them about the backup lamp. I wrote it in the log. I wrote the accuracy of the beacon time, the absence of identification, my own sit-down until sunrise. I have that logbook in the drawer beside the stove, and I will leave it there. Rule 4. Any object found on the catwalk in the morning must be photographed 3 times from 3 angles, and the photos must be kept on the camera memory card for 90 days. The object is then to be left on the catwalk until the Coast Guard sends a team. If no team arrives within 72 hours, the object is to be placed on the gallery railing at the seaward corner and not brought inside. Under no circumstance is the object to be brought into the cottage, into the lamp room, or into any interior space of the station. This rule was the one Earl made the most difficult to understand, because Earl had to teach me why it was dangerous before he could teach me why it was necessary. He told me the objects are not for the keeper. He told me the objects are not to be touched by the keeper. He told me the lighthouse keeps a list of its own, and the objects are how the lighthouse keeps it. I have found objects on the catwalk 19 times in 22 winters. Most of them are ordinary objects. A glove, a child's shoe, the kind with Velcro half wet, a fishing knife with a broken tip, a pocket watch that had stopped at 11:46, a set of keys with a ring that read, in tidy brass letters, E.P., Earl's initials. I have never photographed them, because Earl did not teach me Rule 4 until after Earl had died. I have photographed them, over the 19 times since, including the watch, which I have left on the seaward corner for as many seasons as it will stay dry. Earl's keys. I found Earl's keys on the catwalk in October of 2004, my first winter as keeper. I did not know the rule then. I picked up the keys and put them in my pocket. I went up to the lamp room and lit the lamp. I came down. I made dinner. I went to bed. In the morning, the keys were on the kitchen table. In the morning, those keys had been inside my pocket, and they were on my kitchen table, and I had slept alone in the cottage. In the morning, the radio made a sound that was not a channel, and I opened the log and I wrote, "Keys found, Brought inside. Advised incorrect. Earl? Earl answered the radio that morning. Earl was alive, and Earl was in Lubeck, and Earl said, "Did you find something on the catwalk?" I said I had found a set of keys with EP on the ring. Earl said, "Hang them outside on the gallery by sunrise." I said, "What do you mean?" Earl said, "Hang them where you found them, Henry. The lighthouse does not want them inside the cottage." I said, "They are already inside." Earl went quiet for a long time. Then Earl said, "Then somebody else is going to come looking for them." I took the keys back out to the catwalk the next morning at sunrise. I did not bring anything inside again. In 2014, I found a photograph on the catwalk, in a cheap plastic frame with a metal stand, and the photograph was of the Black Snout light, as it had looked in 1996, the year of the restoration. The photograph had been taken from inside the gallery, looking out. There were no people in the photograph. I photographed it 3 times, kept the photos on the camera, and left the photograph on the seaward corner of the gallery railing. The Coast Guard did not come for 72 hours. I went back to the corner to move it to the catwalk before the rain came. The photograph was gone. The frame was gone. The metal stand was gone. The catwalk was empty. The camera memory card still has the photos, and I look at them once a season. Earl told me, before he died, the lighthouse knows what has walked on it. The lighthouse knows what it has lost. Anything that comes up from the seaward side is a name. The lighthouse will not let you keep its names inside. In 2018, a Coast Guard auxiliary out of Eastport did an unauthorized tour of the station on a Sunday when I was off the point getting supplies. The auxiliary left a child's mitten on the catwalk, the kind with the thumb still attached, the kind that sheds when it's wet. The auxiliary did not tell me they had been there. The auxiliary did not file a log. I found the mitten on a Tuesday and I followed Rule 4. I photographed it. I left it on the gallery railing. I sent an urgent request to Southwest Harbor. They sent a man 2 days later. He looked at the mitten, looked at me, and asked me why I had not thrown it in the ocean. I said, "Because that is not what the log says to do." He said, "It is the auxiliary's mitten. I will give it back." I said no. He took the mitten anyway. He took the photos off my camera, in the correct official form, and signed a receipt. I have that receipt in the same drawer as the logbook, and I have the photos on the camera card, because I had already made copies to a disk I keep in the kitchen for what the Coast Guard does not need to look at. The auxiliary's man did not come back to the point. The auxiliary was not invited back to the point. The Coast Guard flies the maintenance crew down from Southwest Harbor. Rule 5. On the night of the first named storm of November, the lamp must be kept burning until dawn, regardless of what is visible on the gallery. The keeper must not step onto the gallery. The keeper must not open any door that faces seaward. The keeper must keep the kitchen radio on and answer with the word "Black Snout" only. The keeper must not look directly down the cliff from any window of the cottage. Earl told me, there is one night in November when the station asks more of the keeper than the rest of the year. Earl told me this on the night of my 3rd training session with him, late October, with the first cold already in. Earl said, "When the first storm of November is named, the ocean remembers what the lighthouse did in the spring. The ocean pays a visit. The keeper stays in the cottage and answers, and does not look." I have kept that rule on 5 nights, 2007, 2010, 2013, 2017, 2021. The night in 2013 was the worst of them. It was the year Hurricane Lorenzo came up the Atlantic as a post-tropical storm and made landfall east of Bar Harbor before the forecasters could rename it. The first named storm of November was Lorenzo. The buoy started sounding wrong at lunchtime. The lighthouse pressure went down, which on Black Snout means the wind had moved northeast and the tide was about to climb the cliff. I put on the foul weather gear and climbed the tower to clean the lens at 4 in the afternoon, and the lamp was lit at sunset, and I came down, and I sat at the kitchen table, and the radio said, "Black Snout," Black Snout. This is Jonesport. And I said, Black Snout. And I did not turn on the parlor light. And I did not go to the bedroom. And I did not look at any window that faced seaward. At 7:30 I heard the catwalk. The catwalk on Black Snout is the iron path that runs around the base of the tower, halfway between the gallery deck and the seaward cliff. There is a railing of twisted bar on the seaward side, and the tower wall on the inside. I have heard the catwalk in every kind of weather. There is a particular tone that wind makes on iron. There is another particular tone that ice makes on iron. There is a particular tone that something else makes on iron, and I had only heard it 3 times before, and each time it was on the named storm night in November. The clink was a single footfall, then a second, then a third, evenly spaced, like a man at the end of a long walk, setting his boot carefully down. The footfalls were not in time with mine. I was sitting in the kitchen. They were not in time with the wind. They were not in time with the buoy. They were in time with each other, walking the catwalk the way you walk a sidewalk, with no hurry, with no skip. The lamp was burning. The lamp was on the lamp room floor. The lamp glowed yellow from the lenses of the gallery. The gallery was hung with brass frames I had cleaned that afternoon. Through the seaward windows of the cottage I could, if I chose to look, see the gallery lit from below, and I could see the catwalk as a curved silhouette, with the seaward railing lit by the lamp spill. I did not look. The kitchen radio said, Black Snout. This is Jonesport. I said, Black Snout. The cutter said, Are you sheltering in place? I said, Black Snout. The cutter said, We have you at the cottage. Stay there. Storm cell will pass around 2 a.m. I said, Black Snout. The footfalls walked the catwalk. I counted them the way I was not supposed to count steps on the stair, and I could not help myself, and I counted 347 of them before the footfalls slowed, near the end of the seaward side of the catwalk, near the cliff corner, where I had left Earl's keys and the auxiliary's mitten over the years, and the footfalls stopped, and the catwalk went silent, and the wind screamed, and the buoy sounded wrong, and the lamp burned, and the cottage did not answer, and the lighthouse kept the count. At 2 a.m. the cutter radioed again. Black Snout, I said. Black Snout. The cutter said, Storm cell has passed. You're clear to traverse the gallery. Check the lamp post storm. We'll be down in the morning. Good night, Henry, I said. Black Snout. I did not traverse the gallery that night. I did not look at the seaward windows. I sat in the kitchen with my hands on the stove handle, and I waited for daylight. At sunrise, I went up the stairs to the lamp room. I did not count the steps. I did not look down the stairwell. I made it to the lamp room, and I latched the door, and I looked at the catwalk from inside the lamp room, through the seaward panes, and there was nothing on the catwalk. There was no object. There was no footprint in the salt. There was no visible disturbance in the fresh snow that had started to dust the iron by 6:30. I cleaned the lens. I logged the storm. I walked down the stairs, and on the 3rd step there was a single mark in the dust on the iron tread, the kind of dust the lamp blasts onto every tread over the course of a winter. The mark was a thumbnail strip, the size of a thumbprint. The mark was not from my boot. The mark was wet. I went back down the stairs. I did not look at the seaward windows of the cottage. I called the Coast Guard at Southwest Harbor. I told them I had found what could be a person on the tower stairs. They sent a man from Bar Harbor. The man came twice. The first time he walked the catwalk and found nothing. The second time he walked the cottage with me, and we opened every door and closet. The mark on the 3rd stair was gone. The dust was undisturbed. The Coast Guard man looked at me. He said, Henry, are you okay out here alone in the winter? I said yes. He said, Earl was winter keeper for 30 years before you. Do you have any of his notes? I said no. Earl's notes were Earl's, and Earl had not left them to me. That is the night I keep with the lamp. That is the night the lighthouse asked for everything I had been keeping. That is the night I think Earl meant, when he said the lighthouse remembers what the keeper did in the spring, and the lighthouse pays a visit, and the keeper does not answer, except by saying the name of the station, and the name of the station is what holds the night together. Tonight, the buoy is sounding wrong. The wind is from the east. The Coast Guard has told me to shelter in place. The radio is on. The lamp is lit. The rules are on the door. I climbed the tower at 5 to check the lamp, and I did not count the steps, and I did not look down the stairwell, and the footsteps walked the gallery behind me as I walked the lamp room in my foul weather boots. Earl's keys are still on the gallery railing at the seaward corner. Earl's keys have been on the gallery railing for 19 winters. Earl's keys have never moved in any weather, because the gallery railing at Black Snout is bolted to the tower body, and only a person inside the lighthouse could move a thing on the gallery. Earl's keys are gone. Earl's keys are not at the seaward corner. Earl's keys are not on the catwalk. Earl's keys are not inside the cottage, or on the table or in the drawer. I checked the drawer. I checked the kitchen. I checked the parlor. I checked the bedroom. Earl's keys are gone, the way the photograph was gone in 2014, the way the auxiliary's mitten should have been gone if the auxiliary's man had not taken it. I called the Coast Guard at Southwest Harbor. The Coast Guard did not answer. I called the cutter at Jonesport. The cutter did not answer. I called Channel 16 3 times. I called Channel 22 3 times. I called Channel 13 and 9 and the Maine Marine Band. I did not get an answer. The buoy has stopped sounding wrong. The buoy has stopped sounding. The buoy is silent, which on Black Snout is the signal that the station is being asked to do what it was lit to do. The lamp is on. The lamp is burning. I am keeping the lamp on. I am not telling you what I am doing at the seaward windows of the cottage, because you would tell me to look, and I am not going to look, and you shouldn't either. I am sitting at the kitchen table. The radio is on. I am not going to answer any voice that is not the cutter at Jonesport. I am not going to name the station unless I am asked. I am not going to open the bedroom. I am not going to open the seaward door. I am going to stay here until dawn. Earl told me the lighthouse remembers what the keeper did in the spring. Earl told me the lighthouse keeps a list of its own. Earl told me the keeper's job is to keep remembering what is on the list, and to keep the lamp on long enough that the lighthouse forgets what is on its own list. And the keeper's list is what the lighthouse needs to be told, because the lighthouse has been lit since 1857, and the lighthouse has always had a keeper who knows the rules and writes the rules on a single sheet of paper and pins the paper to the inside of the bedroom door. Earl told me the lighthouse is not a building. Earl told me the lighthouse is a sentence the coast is still trying to finish. Earl told me the keeper's job is to keep the sentence from ending. I am Henry Calloway. I am the winter keeper of Black Snout Light. The lamp is on. The lamp is on. The lamp is on. I am not going to tell you what is at the seaward windows, and you should not ask me, because if I tell you, the lighthouse will hear me, and the lighthouse is not supposed to hear me from the cottage. And if it hears me from the cottage, the lighthouse will think the cottage is part of the station, and the cottage is not part of the station. The cottage is mine, the lamp is the lighthouse's. I do not know what is at the seaward windows. I know this. The coast of Maine is older than the light. The lighthouse was built to keep something out, or to keep something in. The Coast Guard calls it an aid to navigation. The fishermen call it a saint. Earl called it a station. I call it by its name. I call it Black Snout. I am going to sit here at the table with my hands on the stove and the radio in front of me and the candle on the windowsill, and I am going to wait for dawn, and when the dawn comes, I am going to climb the tower, and I am not going to count the steps, and I am not going to look down the stairwell, and the lamp will still be on. I am going to keep the lamp on until the Coast Guard sends a man down from Southwest Harbor. I am going to keep the lamp on until they pry me off this point, or until I am no longer the keeper. Earl's keys are gone. The photograph is gone. The auxiliary's mitten went back in 2018 in a man's pocket. Earl's keys went tonight. The lamp is asking me what I am going to leave on the gallery at sunrise. I am not going to leave anything on the gallery at sunrise. I am going to leave the lamp on, and I am going to walk back down the stairs, and I am going to write this in the log in pencil, and I am going to pin the rules back on the inside of the bedroom door, and I am going to wait for dawn. The dawn came. The buoy did not start again until 4 minutes past sunrise. I did not climb the tower until 10. I cleaned the lens. I logged the storm. The Coast Guard flew a man from Southwest Harbor at 2 in the afternoon. The Coast Guard man walked the gallery and the catwalk and the cottage. He did not find Earl's keys. He did not find an object on the catwalk. He asked me what had happened that night. I said the buoy had sounded wrong and the radio had not answered, and I had sheltered in place, and I had kept the lamp on. He said, "Anything else?" I said no. He said, "Henry, you're 64. You can retire. They will find a new winter keeper. You don't have to do this forever." I said, "I know." I called Southwest Harbor on my sat phone. I told the operations officer I wanted to stay one more winter. He said he would put me on the list. He did not ask me why. He did not ask me about the keys. He did not ask me about the radio. He did not ask me why I had not answered the buoy. He said, "Henry, are you sure?" I said, "Yes." When he hung up, I sat at the kitchen table for an hour. I did not look at the seaward windows. I did not look at the bedroom. I did not look at the door with the rules pinned to it. I looked at the radio on the chair. I looked at the lamp lit on the tower through the seaward window of the parlor. The wrong window. The one I should not have looked at. The one my father told me never to look at when I was a child. Because if you look at the light through the seaward window, the light will see you looking. The lamp is still on. The lamp is on, and I am at the table, and I am going to stay here until the Coast Guard flies me out in April, and I am going to keep the lamp on for as many winters as they will let me keep it, because Earl was right. The lighthouse is not a building. The lighthouse is a sentence. The sentence is the one the coast has been trying to finish since 1857. The keeper's job is to keep the sentence from ending. I am Henry Calloway. I am the keeper of Black Snout Light. The lamp is on. The rules are on the door. Earl's keys are gone. I am still here. I am still here. I am going to keep the lamp on.